I was sorting through the last box of my mother's belongings when the envelope slid out like a forgotten secret demanding to be heard. It was thin, yellowing, and tucked beneath a stack of condolence cards I'd never had the heart to reread. My stepmother, Lorraine, was laughing on the phone in the kitchen, planning her well-deserved break, as she called it. She wanted a beach, a resort, massages, and silence. Especially silence from me. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. A bank statement. The kind issued when offices still had dot matrix printers and clerks addressed envelopes by hand. I almost put it aside, thinking it was something old and irrelevant, but then I saw the date, only 2 years old. Nearly 2 decades after my mother had passed. My mother's name. Her signature. Her account. The balance. $380,422.87. My breath caught. The room shifted. Somewhere behind me, Lorraine's laughter sharpened into something brittle. That account should not have existed. Everything of my mother's had been probated and settled long ago. My father assured me of that when I was 19. I accepted it because I trusted him. And later, after his death, I trusted Lorraine, mostly because she expected me to. Yet here it was. A financial ghost. A truth that refused to stay buried. I scanned the page again, slower this time. The last withdrawal was 6 months ago. 6 months ago. 5 years after my father's death. In my mother's name. That meant someone had access. Someone had power of attorney they should never have been able to use again. Someone living in my house. Someone planning a vacation funded by money that did not belong to her. I folded the paper carefully, as though it might crumble under the weight of what it revealed, and slid it into my sweater pocket. From the kitchen, Lorraine's voice floated through the hallway, sweeter than honey but twice as sticky. "I'll have the deposit by Friday," she said, giggling. Yes, the suite with the ocean view. Deposit. Friday. I felt something ancient rise inside me, something steady, not wild. My mother used to call it my quiet backbone. The strength to stand even when the world tilts. It arrived just in time. A thought crystallized with perfect clarity. She stole from my mother. And she's still stealing. I stepped back from the box of belongings, my heart pounding with controlled, precise shock. I needed air. I needed clarity. I needed to move before she suspected anything. I slipped toward the stairs, careful not to let the floorboards betray me, but the third one creaked, a soft warning shot. "Is that you, Margaret?" Lorraine called out. "I hope you're not making a mess up there. We have guests this weekend." I swallowed, gripping the paper in my pocket. Guests. A deposit due. A stolen fortune. I forced my voice to remain steady. Just finishing up. But inside me, something had already shifted, permanently and irrevocably. The truth was awake. And I wasn't going to let it go back to sleep. Because what I found wasn't just a forgotten account. It was a fuse. A fuse that, once lit, would burn straight through the life Lorraine thought she controlled. And what waited at the end of that fuse? I wasn't even sure I was prepared for it myself. Especially when I discovered who else had known about it. My name is Margaret Hale, and I am 62 years old. Age has not softened my voice or my resolve. It has clarified both. I live in the home my father built, a quiet 2-story house with weathered shutters and a porch where my mother once grew geraniums. I keep the porch empty now. I never wanted to see anything attempt to bloom under Lorraine's presence. My life, until recently, had grown into a steady, predictable rhythm. I worked part-time at the library, volunteered at the senior center on Wednesdays, and spent evenings reading or watching the street lamps flicker to life. I wasn't lonely, though some would call it that. I was simply at peace with my own company. Lorraine, however, lived like a woman constantly auditioning for the life she believed she deserved. Silk blouses for grocery runs. Dramatic sighs over bills she never paid. A smile that cracked whenever she thought no one was looking. She arrived in my life when I was 25, shortly after my mother's death, and married my father within a year. My father worshipped her elegance, her confidence, her ease with social charm. I tried to tolerate her for his sake. After he passed, that tolerance became a quiet obligation. The house was left to me, but Lorraine insisted she remain until she could stand on her feet again. That was 12 years ago. Her feet, evidently, preferred expensive shoes and very little standing. I never considered myself someone who sought conflict. I have always believed in decency, documentation, and deliberate action. My mother raised me that way. Margaret, she used to say, truth is a slow walker, but it never loses its way. I clung to that wisdom through many disappointments. But the envelope, that changed something. It pressed a finger directly against a bruise I hadn't realized still existed. Because this wasn't about money. Not truly. It was about my mother. Her integrity. Her memory. Her trust in the people who lived after her. And someone had violated that. That night, after discovering the account, I sat at the edge of my bed and unfolded the paper once more. I read every line with the kind of intense focus I hadn't felt since writing college essays by lamplight. Account holder, Eleanor Hale. Account type, savings. Beneficiary, none listed. Secondary signatory. I froze. There it was, Lorraine Whitmore Hale. My stepmother had been given access somehow. And not by accident. The signature authorization date was 8 months after my mother died. 8 months. My father had signed off on it. I stared at his name, inked neatly next to Lorraine's. A quiet ache moved through me. I didn't know whether I was angry at him or devastated by the trust he had misplaced. I remembered Lorianne's tone when she spoke of vacations, shopping trips, private expenses. I remembered how often she told me not to worry about ancient paperwork. And I remembered something else, how my father kept insisting the estate had been fully handled. But this account had never been disclosed. Had he known? Had he looked the other way? Had Lorraine pressured him? I didn't know yet. All I knew was this. I needed answers. And the first answer arrived the next morning, in the form of a single sentence overheard at the bottom of the stairs, spoken softly, urgently, by Lorraine on the phone. She'll never find out. I stood frozen on the steps. Because the tone in her voice wasn't hopeful. It was certain. And certainty like that comes only from someone who believes the truth has been buried deep enough to stay dead. But I was done burying things. And I was about to learn that the account was only the beginning. The next few days were an exercise in patience. A performance, really. I drifted through the house as though nothing had changed, though inside me, every sense was heightened, every memory reframed. The house, once quiet, suddenly felt full of ghosts. My mother's careful handwriting on old recipe cards, my father's pipe still resting on the mantel, the photo of the two of them laughing at their 25th anniversary. Lorraine had wanted to take that photo down years ago, claiming it dated the decor, but I refused. Now, I understood why it bothered her. It was a reminder that she had arrived late to the story, and yet somehow written herself into the earlier chapters. My relationship with Lorraine had always been brittle, civil but hollow. She called me dear in a tone that made the word feel like an insult wrapped in lace. I called her Lorraine, never Mom, because that title wasn't hers. My mother's absence had been too wide, too deep, for anyone to step into. Even after 12 years of cohabitation, we lived like two mismatched tenants. I cooked for myself, she cooked for herself. We cleaned our own spaces. We navigated shared areas like strangers passing in a corridor. Some nights, I would hear her watching television downstairs, laughing at shows I didn't understand. Other nights, she would call friends and describe her life here as though she were a woman burdened with caring for an ungrateful relative. I never confronted her. I didn't need conflict. I needed peace. But peace had been built atop deceit. One afternoon, I found her at the dining table with travel brochures spread like a fan of indulgence. Maldives, Costa Rica, Santorini. She held a pen between manicured fingers, circling the words, VIP package. Planning something exciting? I asked mildly. She looked up, startled for only a millisecond before her smile clicked into place. Oh, Margaret. Just a little trip for myself. Self-care is important, you know. Some of us don't like to rust away in routine. I ignored the jab. Expensive destination. She shrugged. I'll manage. I have resources. Resources. A word that suddenly felt like a confession. She gathered the brochures too quickly, and I noticed, really noticed, how she shielded them with her forearm. A territorial gesture. A guilty one. But I kept my face neutral. Silence, after all, is a powerful tool. My mother taught me that too. Later that evening, as I prepared tea, I heard a familiar voice on the answering machine. My cousin, Miriam. Margaret, I found something in Aunt Eleanor's files, she said. Old trust paperwork. I think you should see it. Call me back. I froze mid-step. My mother had once told me she named me her sole heir. She said she had arranged everything for my security. She said she trusted that my father would honor her wishes. And I had believed her. But for years, something had bothered me. The lack of documentation, the missing files, the way my father brushed questions aside with a tired smile. Now there was the account. And now there were old trust papers. I dialed Miriam immediately. Her voice was brisk, urgent. Margaret, your mother created a trust in your name. It was meant to stay intact until you turned 40. Every asset transferred to you unless she amended the terms. Unless she amended them how? I asked. That's the thing, Miriam said quietly. There's no amendment. None. Someone removed documents from the file. I thought maybe you had copies. I had none. And suddenly, the walls of the house felt tighter, the air heavier, and a memory from 20 years ago surfaced. My father and Lorraine whispering in the study, a stack of folders between them, my father saying, "She'll never question it." And at the time I hadn't. But I was questioning everything now. Especially when Miriam's next words struck like a flint against dry straw. Margaret, the trust should have included that savings account. All of it. The entire thing was meant for you. I gripped the phone, my pulse thundering. And before I could respond, I heard a soft click behind me. Lorraine stood in the doorway, listening. Her expression unreadable. And I realized the family secrets I was uncovering were secrets she had guarded far more fiercely than I ever imagined. Lorraine didn't speak at first. She simply stood there, one manicured hand resting on the doorframe, her expression composed but her eyes calculating. I ended the call with Miriam quickly, tucking my phone into my pocket, though both of us knew she'd heard enough to understand the conversation hadn't been casual. She stepped into the kitchen with the slow, precise movements of someone walking through an invisible web she herself had spun. "You've been very curious lately, Margaret," she said. Her voice was calm, unbothered, too calm. The kind of calm that belongs to a person who believes she controls the scene entirely. "I've had questions," I replied. She smiled thinly. "About things that don't concern you." That sentence landed like a slap. Not because of the words, but because of what she didn't bother hiding anymore. She no longer saw the need to perform civility. I reached for my mug, keeping my hands steady. "My mother's accounts concern me." Her expression flickered. Barely, but enough to confirm what I already knew. "Old accounts, ancient history," she said. "Your mother didn't care about money. You shouldn't either." The audacity of it tightened something low in my chest. My mother cared enough to create a trust for me. A trust you somehow never mentioned. She inhaled sharply. Not guilt. Annoyance. I understood something then. Lorraine didn't fear exposure. She feared inconvenience. She'd spent 2 decades benefiting from the silence of 2 people. My father and me. Silence had become her greatest ally. Until now. She placed both hands on the counter and leaned forward slightly. "Margaret, your father and I handled everything. You were a child when your mother passed, There were decisions you wouldn't have understood. I was 25. And still naive. She said it with the casual cruelty of someone who had repeated the line to herself many times, polishing it like a stone. I took a breath, reminding myself that confrontation without preparation was reckless. My mother's form of justice was deliberate, quiet, documented. She never made an accusation without proof she could lay out piece by irrefutable piece. Lorraine broke the silence first. I understand you've been exploring the attic. Yes. Looking for trouble. Looking for truth. She sighed dramatically, flipping her hair in a gesture that once charmed my father. Your mother left nothing for you. She was terrible with finances. Your father and I kept this household afloat. My father had said similar things, often with weariness, but always with love. Lorraine said them like someone reciting a script she believed would shut down further inquiry. But then she made her mistake. She added softly, if there had been anything left, trust me, I would have told you. And I saw it. The flicker of her eyes to my sweater pocket, the faint shift of her posture, the instinctive check for evidence. She knew. She knew about the account. She knew I had found something. And she was afraid, not of morality, not of consequences, but of losing access to a resource she believed she had earned through cleverness and endurance. She stepped forward, brushing imaginary crumbs off the table. You should stop digging, Margaret. It won't lead anywhere pleasant. But she underestimated me. She always had. Because beneath my gentle exterior lived a backbone tempered by grief, loss, and a lifetime of being underestimated. I'm not afraid of unpleasant, I said. She gave me a long, evaluating look. Then she gathered her brochures, slid them into her bag, and walked toward the stairs. But at the landing she paused and turned, her smile thin as wire. Your father trusted me, she said quietly. You should too. Then she went upstairs, her heels tapping a rhythm I suddenly recognized as a warning. Later that night, after she went to bed, I searched the kitchen for the trash she'd thrown away earlier. Tucked beneath an orange peel and a crumpled shopping receipt was a printed itinerary. Her upcoming trip wasn't a simple vacation. It was 6 weeks. 6 weeks abroad. 6 weeks away from the country. Lorraine was preparing to vanish. And I realized with cold clarity. She wasn't planning a vacation. She was preparing an escape, with my mother's stolen $380,000. I barely slept that night. Instead, I sat at the small desk in my room, the bank statement laid flat in front of me like a living accusation. The digits swam in my vision. My mother's name. Lorraine's signature. Withdrawals logged long after my father's death. At dawn, I brewed a cup of tea and pulled out the old fireproof box my father kept beneath his desk, a place he once stored tax forms and warranty slips. I hadn't opened it in years. The lock was simple. The contents, however, were not. Inside were estate documents, insurance policies, photocopied wills, and something I had never seen before, a handwritten note from my father. It read, "For Margaret. When she is ready." My throat tightened. I unfolded it carefully. The note was brief. My father had never been verbose, but the words struck like a silent blow. I made mistakes. I hope you will forgive me someday. Trust is not the same as love, and I learned that too late. Mistakes. My father, the man who balanced checkbooks to the penny, who double-checked every tax form, who once drove back to a grocery store because he believed he'd been undercharged $5. He had made financial mistakes? Or had he been manipulated? I sifted deeper through the papers. I found the original probate filing. The inventory list of assets. The claims of debts owed. But something was missing. My mother's savings account was not listed. At all. The trust papers Miriam mentioned weren't there either. Pages had been removed. I scanned the probate stamp again. It was filed by an attorney named Daniel McCormick. I remembered him, a calm, practical man who used to send my father Christmas cards. I searched his name online. He was still practicing, still in town. I called. He answered with a voice older, graver, but still steady. When I introduced myself, he hesitated. Then he said, "Margaret. I wondered when, or if, you might ever call. I've kept your mother's file all these years." That sentence alone nearly unraveled me. We met that afternoon in his tidy office lined with dusty law books and photographs of landscapes he probably hadn't visited in decades. He didn't waste time. He placed a folder on the desk between us. My mother's name was written across it in neat cursive. Inside were copies of everything. The trust papers. The original savings account. The beneficiary designation. My name. And a transfer authorization form bearing 3 signatures. My mother's, my father's, and Lorraine's. But the date on Lorraine's signature was nearly a year after my mother passed. My hands trembled. How is this possible? Daniel leaned back. After your mother died, your father asked me to release several documents to him. He said Lorraine wanted to help him organize the estate. I warned him not to add new signatories without formal review, but he insisted. He said it was temporary. Temporary. A word that often outstays its welcome. I turned to the next page. A ledger of withdrawals spanning nearly 20 years, small amounts at first, then larger. Shopping. Spa visits. Household expenses, written in handwriting I recognized as Lorraine's. I looked up at Daniel. "Why didn't you contact me when my father died?" "I did," he said softly. Lorraine intercepted the letters. Twice. My breath froze. Intercepted. She had deliberately blocked communication meant for me. I closed the file slowly, grateful for every document I had now gathered, every page, every signature, every trail she never expected anyone to follow. "Daniel," I said, "I think she's planning to leave the country." He didn't look surprised. "Then you don't have time to waste." He handed me a card. "This forensic accountant is trustworthy. And Margaret, you need to protect yourself." As I left the office, the winter wind cut sharply through my coat, but I hardly felt it. My steps were quicker, my thoughts clearer, my resolve firmer. I had proof now. Enough to question. Enough to expose. Enough to dismantle whatever escape Lorraine was planning. But that night, as I reviewed everything in my bedroom, I heard her moving downstairs. Not her usual sounds, these were heavier. Final. Luggage wheels rolling. Cabinet doors closing. And then the unmistakable sound. The front door unlocking. She was leaving. And she didn't plan on coming back. I moved quickly but quietly to the top of the stairs. Below me, the foyer light created a golden pool on the floor, and in that glow stood Lorraine, coat on, passport in hand, suitcase upright beside her like a loyal companion. She wasn't planning to leave tomorrow. She was leaving now. Her movements were deliberate and unhurried, like someone following a well-rehearsed script. She zipped the side compartment of her luggage, checked for her ticket, and slipped a sleek folder into the outer pocket. I descended the stairs one step at a time until she finally noticed me. Her expression did not shift. She didn't startle. She didn't frown. She simply regarded me with a cool, detached interest, as though I were an interruption in a schedule she had mastered down to the minute. "Going somewhere?" I asked. She clicked the suitcase handle down. "I told you I needed a break. At midnight. Red-eye flights are cheaper." We both knew the lie sat between us like something sour. She reached for the door handle, but I stepped off the last stair and positioned myself squarely in her path. I kept my voice even, precise. "I know about the account, Lorraine." A pause, short but telling. She exhaled through her nose, as though relieved the conversation was finally out in the open. "Margaret, you should have stayed in your lane. My mother trusted my father. My father trusted you. And you used both of them." She tilted her head slightly. "Your parents were sentimental. They had no business sense. I kept this household running. With my mother's inheritance. With money that I had access to. Perfectly legally, I might add. Not legally, I said. Not ethically. And not without consequences. Something cold flickered in her eyes. What consequences? You have nothing, Margaret. Nothing but a few scraps of paper you barely understand. I smiled. Softly, slowly. I understand enough. She shifted, her fingers tightening around her passport. Whatever you think you've uncovered, it's too late. I'm tired of living in this mausoleum with someone who refuses to move forward. You're not moving forward, I said quietly. You're running. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I gave your father the best years of my life. You gave yourself the best years of my mother's account. That got through. Her jaw tensed. I continued, calm and resolute. I've spoken with the estate attorney. I have the documents. I know the trust was meant for me. I know you accessed the account after my mother died. And I know you intercepted letters after my father passed. Her face went white, then flushed with a contained, simmering anger. You don't know what your father asked of me, she whispered. You don't know what he needed me to handle because he couldn't handle his own guilt. Guilt. There it was, finally spoken aloud. What did he feel guilty about, Lorraine? She hesitated, and in that hesitation lived the truth she had spent years concealing. But she recovered quickly. It doesn't matter now. She reached again for the door. I stepped aside, not to let her through, but to cross to the small table by the staircase. I picked up the folder I had prepared earlier, filled with every document I had gathered that day. I held it up. If you leave tonight, I will file this first thing in the morning. Fraud, estate theft, identity misuse. And I will win. She froze. Truly froze. For the first time in years, I watched certainty slip from her posture. You wouldn't dare, she said. I met her eyes steadily. Watch me. The suitcase handle twitched in her grip. And then, unbelievably, she let go of it. She stepped backward slowly, her eyes never leaving the folder, as though it were an explosive I might detonate. Then she said a sentence that chilled me to my core. Margaret, you don't understand who else is involved. I opened my mouth to respond, but she continued. You're not fighting just me. And the fear in her voice was real. That was when someone knocked on the front door. Hard. 3 times. The knocks echoed through the house, sharp and commanding, cutting through the tension like a blade. Lorraine's eyes widened, not with surprise, but with recognition. Whoever stood on the other side of that door was not unexpected to her. She whispered, You shouldn't be here when I answer. But I didn't move. I stepped closer. She swallowed, squared her shoulders, and opened the door. 2 men stood on the porch. Not police. Not friends. They wore tailored coats, expensive but understated, and their expressions were the kind that came from lives lived in boardrooms or bank offices. One of them held a clipboard. Mrs. Whitmore Hale? The taller one asked. Lorraine sighed, defeated. Yes. I'm here on behalf of Wexford Financial to discuss the withdrawal attempt made earlier today. I blinked. Withdrawal attempt? Today. He continued, Your identification didn't match the account holder's verification requirements. We attempted to reach you. My heart thudded. She had tried to take more money. Perhaps all of it. Lorraine forced a brittle smile. There must be some mistake. The man shook his head. The bank flagged inconsistencies. I'm required to confirm your documentation in person. May we come inside? Her eyes flicked to me, pleading, warning. It didn't matter. Of course, she murmured. They entered, glancing briefly at me but respecting my space. Lorraine led them to the dining table, her posture shrinking with every step. The shorter man opened the folder on his clipboard. We have several withdrawals made under the secondary signatory name, your name. However, due to a recent audit, we need to verify continued authorization. Lorraine's voice cracked. Audit. Randomized. But thorough. He placed a stack of documents in front of her. Several bore signatures. Hers, my father's. They looked legitimate but old, faded. The man pointed. These signatures from 15 years ago match your file. But these, he tapped more recent sheets, do not. The handwriting differs. The heir left the room. I stared at the pages. The older documents were certainly hers. But the newer ones, slightly slanted, smoother, hardly noticeable unless compared side by side. Lorraine had forged her own signature, trying to mimic a younger version of herself. The auditors knew. My pulse steadied with quiet inevitability. The taller man turned to me. Ms. Hale, as the biological daughter of the original account holder, we may need a statement from you. Lorraine shot up from her chair. She has nothing to do with this. I stepped forward gently. Actually, I do. The man nodded. Given the irregularities, the account will be frozen pending investigation. All recent withdrawals and activity will be reviewed. Lorraine's breath hitched, and for the first time, she looked small. Not elegant. Not composed. Just small. Frozen, she whispered. But I need. Her voice trailed off. She knew exactly what this meant. This wasn't police sirens. This wasn't handcuffs. This was worse. This was silent consequence. Her entire plan evaporating without spectacle, without any opportunity to talk her way out, charm her way out, or manipulate her way out. The men packed their folders, thanked us, and left with quiet professionalism. The door shut behind them with a softness that felt like judgment. Lorraine sank into a chair. I stood across from her, calm, steady. You did this, she whispered. No, I said. You did. She buried her face in her hands. But then, in a voice almost broken, she repeated what she had told me earlier. You don't understand who else is involved. And when she lifted her head, tears streaked her mascara. It wasn't just me, Margaret. Your father, he asked me to keep things from you. He changed things. He hid things. You think I manipulated him, but he wasn't the man you remember. I felt my breath still. What do you mean? I asked. She inhaled shakily. Your mother didn't die the way you think she did. The room tilted. She looked directly at me. There are things your father never told you. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and disorienting. My mind raced through memories of my parents. Dinners, gentle conversations, whispered arguments I wasn't meant to overhear. My father wasn't perfect, but he had been steady, loving, consistent. The suggestion that he harbored secrets that could reframe my entire life left me unmoored. Explain, I whispered. Lorraine wiped her eyes, the remnants of her composure dissolving. Your mother was sick. Sicker than you knew. She refused treatment for almost a year before she told your father. By then, it was too late. She didn't want her illness to define your memories of her, so she swore him to silence. My stomach tightened. What does that have to do with the money? Or with you? Everything, she said. Your mother had created that trust long before she became ill. Your father was overwhelmed, grieving before she was even gone. He couldn't bring himself to review her financial plans. I tried to help, but he fell apart. He wasn't malicious, Margaret. He was drowning. I felt the familiar ache of grief, but sharper now, threaded with confusion. So my father gave you access? I asked. At first to keep the household running, she said. Then, after her death, he asked me to handle everything. He didn't want you burdened. He thought you were too fragile, too heartbroken. And when he realized he had already allowed access he shouldn't have, he panicked. He asked me to correct it quietly. But by then, I had grown accustomed to controlling things. Her voice cracked again, brittle with a rare honesty I had never witnessed. I didn't start out intending to take anything from you. I truly didn't. But your father refused to confront the mess he had made, and she paused, her jaw tightening. I filled the vacuum. The explanation didn't absolve her. It didn't undo 2 decades of theft. But it did sharpen the contours of the truth. My father had made grave errors born of grief and weakness, and Lorraine had capitalized on them with increasing appetite and decreasing conscience. I'm not here to punish him, I said softly. He's gone. But you're not. Lorraine looked up at me, eyes hollow. And what will you do with me, Margaret? Justice isn't loud. It isn't vengeful. It is precise, deliberate, and deeply personal. My mother's lessons, not my anger, guided me now. I'm not going to destroy you, I said. But you will be accountable. I laid out the terms with quiet clarity. I would not press criminal charges unless she contested the return of the funds. She would sign over her rights to the account, provide a written admission of unauthorized withdrawals, and move out of the house within 2 weeks. No negotiation. Lorraine listened silently, her shoulders slumped. You're sparing me, she said. No, I replied. I'm sparing myself. I don't want the next decade of my life consumed by you. The truth of that settled gently into the room. In the days that followed, with the help of the attorney and a forensic accountant, the funds were secured. The investigation confirmed everything I suspected, and more. In total, Lorraine had spent nearly $600,000 of my mother's assets over the years, including the original account and a second she had tried to disguise through layered withdrawals. She didn't fight the paperwork. Not after the auditor's visit. Not after realizing she was cornered from all sides. Her departure was quiet. No drama. No pleading. She packed her things into the same suitcase she'd nearly used to flee and left the keys on the dining table. The house felt different after she left. Lighter, but not empty. It felt mine again, though it would take time for the air to lose the imprint of her chaos. I stood on the porch the morning after she moved out, watching sunlight stretch across the lawn. For the first time in years, I felt something I could finally name. Relief. But below that, deeper still, lived something more complex. A sense of having stepped into a truth that reshaped everything I thought I understood about my parents, my home, and myself. Yet one question remained unresolved, echoing in my mind. Had my father truly intended for me to inherit everything? Or had he hoped his secrets would stay buried with him? In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life with the steadiness of someone who had been forced to walk through darkness but emerged with sharper sight. I restored the trust account, my mother's legacy, to its rightful place under my name, though I now understood it was more than a financial inheritance. It was a testament to her foresight, her love, her belief in my future. The money mattered, yes, but the meaning behind it mattered more. I renovated parts of the house, not out of vanity, but to reclaim the spaces Lorraine had imprinted with her presence. Fresh paint, new curtains, the return of my mother's geraniums to the porch. Quiet transformations. Intentional ones. People often assume revenge is loud, theatrical, a single explosive moment of justice. But real revenge, ethical revenge, is measured. It is truth brought into daylight. It is the removal of power from those who abused it. It is the restoration of what was taken, and the refusal to let bitterness shape what comes next. My father's mistakes lingered with me for a time. I spent many evenings sorting through his old letters, journals, and notes, trying to understand the man who had loved me imperfectly. What I found was a mixture of tenderness and fear, a man who adored his wife, feared losing her, and made decisions out of desperation rather than malice. He was human, deeply flawed, deeply grieving. I learned to forgive him. Not because he asked for it, but because I needed to move forward untethered. As for Lorraine, she moved to a small apartment across town. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she took a modest accounting job, far from the world of designer handbags and luxury resorts. We never spoke again. Not out of hatred. There was simply nothing left between us but the echo of choices she had made long before the truth surfaced. Consequences found her without my needing to push. And that was enough. On my 63rd birthday, I sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea, the air crisp and gentle. The geraniums bloomed quietly beside me. I thought of my mother, her patience, her foresight, her stubborn hope. I thought of my father, his vulnerabilities, his missteps, his love. I thought of myself, not the woman who had lived in silence for years, but the woman who found the strength to uncover truth and reclaim what was hers. And I realized the moral of my story was simple. Justice is not about restoring the past. It's about protecting the future. If you are listening to this, perhaps you too have felt the weight of secrets, the sting of betrayal, the quiet ache of unfinished truths. Perhaps you have wondered whether confronting them is worth the effort. It is. Not because confrontation is easy, but because clarity is a form of peace. And peace, earned honestly, held gently, is the most valuable inheritance any of us can receive. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I whispered a final promise to my mother, to myself, to anyone who has ever recovered something they thought was lost. I won't let silence bury truth again. Then I stood, turned toward the house that was finally mine again, and stepped into the next chapter, one built on knowledge, integrity, and the unshakable calm of a woman who knows exactly who she is.